Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our third episode of our second series, Specializations and Technicals. I am Luke Lombard, and I'm the Junior Executive of Member Engagement for the Haskayne Consulting Club. And we're really excited to have yet another alumni join us today. Dragosh is here, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about specialization technicals, what he's learned in school, what he's learned on the job, and a lot more. So as excited as we are, let's get right into it. And of course, I want to ask you the first question, and that is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I graduated from the Haskayne School of Business in 2020 with a Bachelor of Commerce, and I majored in finance. And so I had pretty interesting, but also at the same time, pretty standard university experience. So throughout university, I've kind of got involved where I could. So be it with the consulting club for a few years, which I think we'll talk about a lot more about later on. So I won't get too into that, but I was also part of helping start a board games club. I did stuff like Faster at Sea. I did the Explore program, the volunteer tax clinic. So I had a pretty diverse set of experiences, including some more classic stuff like case competitions. But yeah, I think I got the most out of university, and now I'm working at a big consulting firm and just happy to share some thoughts and get people some more information about kind of how consulting works and what my story was.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Just kind of snowballing off what you just said, could you maybe talk to just how being involved in a variety of things has helped you? Maybe how that sort of broadened, what you were interested in. I know you talked about board games club and also case competitions. Like those are two very different things. Could you maybe just talk a little bit to why you think that's important that people get involved in a variety of activities?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on the way you look at them, right? Because you can approach it as being two completely different things, kind of like running a board games club and joining case competitions. You might not think there's a lot of overlap there, but I think depending on your mindset, if you're mindful about going in and getting the right experiences from each one, and it can be experiences that you're interested in because they'll be fun, but also ones that happen to be useful for you. So you can get a lot of the same skills from a diverse amount of different experiences. So I wouldn't like limit yourself to just going straight for classic stuff like case competitions. You can get a lot of the same like public speaking or like leadership and a lot of those different skills, technicals or soft skills, you might call them. You can get a lot of the same experiences from other places if you're just mindful about how you're going in. And there's really, I mean, UFC has like 300 different clubs. There's really great things out there. Like, we have, if you're really going for something specific, you can go for public speaking and go to Toastmasters or like Model UN. And so there's just no reason to limit yourself to only a few sets of things if your interests actually go beyond that.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds great. Just one sec. Sorry, my camera is down low. So whenever I scroll down on the questions, you can see my hand. And I just was on the first question. So I'm just going to scroll there. Sorry. Yeah, we'll just cut that out. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's a great answer. Okay, sick. Well, I'll get on to the next one here. For sure. And just again, to kind of go on to the second question, very similar to what we were talking about before. During your time at university, which activities or even some of the classes that you took, whether that was in your specialization or whether those were just general electives, even outside of business, have you found most beneficial to your role as a consultant?
I think it was definitely in order of usefulness. I think it was definitely extracurriculars before actual classes. And so, like classes, you'll get a lot of the same experiences as everyone else. And so they're kind of shaped around everyone getting the bare minimum. But your extracurriculars are where you can actually help yourself shine in the recruitment process, but also just bring out the best in yourself because you're putting yourself in really cool positions where you get to show the best of what you're capable of. And so I would say things like joining the consulting club, as lame as it might seem, promoting it during the interview for it. I think things like that were actually the most useful, just because you get put in these positions where you're able to develop skills that you otherwise would be doing in very strict environments within your classes. And classes are still super useful for getting a lot of that experience and just broad general knowledge, as well as a few opportunities to present, work in groups. But I think whether it be working for, even if it's smaller problems in the community, or even hypothetical, if it's case competitions, you're still flexing that muscle and putting yourself in positions where you need to kind of think on the spot and solve problems. And you're actually developing those skills that are going to really come to help you later on, whether it's recruitment or actually working in the industry.
For sure. Yeah, I think all that makes sense. And I feel like basically every time I talk to someone, whether it's during an alumni interview or, whether it's just before, just after, even if it's someone, of course, not involved in HCC, they almost always tell me the pieces of university that have made me so good at my job have either been extracurricular, sorry, or work experience. And I agree with you. Almost all of them agree that, of course, classes are still important. That's still something, that you need to be considering. But no, I definitely agree with that. And I know previously you'd said, for example, if you want to improve your public speaking, Toastmasters is a really great way to get involved. Or if you want to learn more about social issues, maybe Model UN is a great way to get involved, or debate, or whatever. Could you maybe talk to a few of those other clubs and what you sort of found, which clubs and activities you maybe associate certain skills with? So for example, as a finance student, what clubs do you think really you could associate with, different finance skills? Or as maybe a math student, maybe some of those too. Really, whatever you have or whatever you can think of off the top of your head, I'd love to hear.
Yeah, sure. So just before I kind of answer your specific question, I'd like to just kind of go over my thinking around this. And so I think that I kind of alluded to this, but the way I see it, there's kind of two ways to approach clubs. So you can either focus specifically on joining a club that'll force you to work on one specific skill or dimension, and that's totally fine. It's a great approach. But another approach is just kind of joining what you're interested in and being mindful about what you're getting out of it, and signing up for executive positions or helping run events or programs, training programs. So I think there's kind of those two approaches to keep in mind, where like I can list some specific clubs that I think would be great for like finance skills, but there's no reason to actually only limit yourself. If you're still interested in other places, you can still get similar skills. But to answer your specific question, I mean, within my university career, I probably stuck to only like 2 or 3 clubs. So I don't know all 300 because they're still constantly changing. But like, for example, within the School of Business, we have clubs for every single major. And any of those are going to give you really great leadership opportunities. We have specific ones for, like, within finance. I know there's different funds that are running. There's really great opportunities for like case competitions if you join JDC West or ICBC, if you're in Haskayne. But a lot of these clubs, they're still open to other faculties. So even there, you don't really have to limit yourself. It's just kind of based on what you're interested in, just go out, do the research, find a club that's mildly related and just make the most of it, you know? Really actually put yourself forward and put your best self forward and actually force yourself to get involved. I think that's much more important than just kind of ticking the box and saying, I want to have better technical skills, so I'm going to join this club. It's a lot more about being mindful about what you want to get out of that club. So if you join one of the investing clubs, if you want to be mindful about it, you know, you do your research, you know specifically what position you want to apply for, whether it's within one of the research positions or an exec position, and just actually thinking about what you're going to do in that position and what you can get out of it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now that you bring that up, I think about it a bit and I think, wow, probably the greatest experience that I have had in a club that I didn't really join because it was specific was I was on the JDC West debate team, and I definitely was not really interested in debate. I didn't want to really improve my public speaking. I sort of just joined it because I thought it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with you. Now that I think back to it, it was probably something that I didn't expect that I'd enjoy. But not only did I learn a lot, like you said, but I also, you know, as I continue to say, really had a great time throughout that year with the team that I had. And yeah, that's great advice. That's great advice for even me. And here I am sitting here asking questions. So it's great to hear that.
Yeah.
I hope a lot of people take that into consideration and move away from just ticking that box, like you said. Yeah, I think that's great advice, actually, and better way to move the question. That's for sure.
Yeah, I just think you'll probably do a lot better if you actually enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, no, exactly, 100%. And I definitely think that carries over into, you know, part-time and full-time work. I've talked to a lot of people who've joined positions that they, you know, thought might make a lot of money or be really prestigious, and they haven't necessarily enjoyed themselves, to say the least. But yeah, all good advice for sure. And kind of going back into the technical skill area, kind of bringing it back in, moving away, I guess, a little bit from the clubs area and more talking about as far as specific technical skills. So maybe a simple one might be Excel, or, you know, the classic one, I have a skill in Microsoft Word, all that sort of stuff. What technical skills have you maybe found most useful, not only in the role that you're currently in, but also, of course, just in past roles, maybe some of the internships you've worked on and so on?
Yeah, I mean, within consulting, an important thing to note is that because everyone's kind of coming from different backgrounds, that's kind of a cool draw about the job. You don't need to necessarily go in with like specific technical skills. So you shouldn't count yourself out if you don't have those. So that's just kind of a caveat I'll throw out there. But if you are kind of interested in what's used more on the job, I mean, it's majority of the time it's going to be Excel and PowerPoint if you're looking for specific programs as your answer. But I think what's more important as sort of a quasi-technical skill, sort of, I think you should really focus on your actual problem-solving skills and your mindset around breaking down problems and getting to the root of the issue. And so because the problems that you'll undertake in your work environment are going to be so much larger and more vague than you'll see in school, it's a really important skill to have to be able to actually look at a problem and start thinking about how you would chip away at it and break it down into its parts. And so I don't know if that counts as like a traditional technical skill, but I think that's definitely much more important to develop than just memorizing Excel formulas, because you'll have that you'll have moments where you need to use Excel, but you'll have moments where you need to get creative about how you use Excel or a different program, since there's honestly so many now, and every problem is kind of going to need its own specific solution. So I think it'll just benefit you a lot more in the long term if you focus on that problem solving mindset rather than specific like Excel formulas and things like that, as important as it is.
Yeah, no, that's that again totally makes sense. Maybe a better question would be, you talked about problem solving and of course getting creative. Are there any soft skills that you can think of that people maybe need to improve on before they get into consulting other than the ones that you've already mentioned?
Yeah, I think for sure soft skills are going to be extremely important. I mean, it's largely being like a client business, it's largely based on relationships and managing those relationships. And so you're really going to need to work on working both internally and externally. So you want to manage those relationships within your team, with your manager, and kind of understanding what they have in their head and getting that out, as well as kind of being good at communicating how you're thinking and contributing to the team and brainstorming, as well as just kind of staying on track on the project. So there's a lot of managing those internal relationships, but then within all that, you can do the perfect analysis. But if you're not able to convince your clients of it, it won't really go anywhere. So that's kind of where this like external relationship management really comes into play. And I think that's kind of something that people don't really think about because it makes sense. You don't really get client experience unless you do really specific programs like HCC. And so you don't really think about it until you join, but then it becomes this new aspect of your work where you not only have to get to the answer, but you have to think about how is the client going to react to how you got to the answer, how you present the answer, and what you're kind of telling them. You have to think about all those different aspects of it. And so it really blends a lot of these hard and soft skills together in a way that a lot of people don't think about until they actually get into the career.
Yeah, fair enough. That perfectly, almost perfectly leads us into our next question, which is, are there skills that maybe you had beforehand or skills that you wish that you had before going into consulting that you find really useful that maybe other people wouldn't find as useful? A good example would be, I know you speak a few different languages. Has there been a situation where you've had to speak another language that you originally thought there's no way? That's the best example I can think of, but I'm sure you'll have a couple more.
So I can't say I've had to speak a different language at work yet. Um, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, but hasn't happened yet. I think the most useful skills I had were honestly probably my hard skills since I came in with a pretty strong Excel background since my previous internship before consulting was a very like analytical heavy role using a lot of Excel doing like corporate financy stuff. So I think that was kind of the most beneficial for me. I probably am still working on my soft skills and communication skills. And so I think that's where a lot of these clubs come in, where you're kind of forced into those positions. And so you mentioned you're doing JDC West, which is, I think it's a great program. You're kind of forced into working in these team environments under stress. You're forced to communicate with people. And so I think that's definitely something that's really worth developing just as much, if not more, than these hard skills. And I mean, these are all skills I'm still developing. I'm still new to this, but even people like industry veterans are still working on this stuff. So it's always going to be important.
For sure. Yeah, and it's just like you said in the previous question, people sort of, I guess, get wrapped up in all of the technical stuff. They forget about some of those soft skills. And maybe that's kind of what people forget about and what people go into the job and realize that they maybe don't have a super good base of. So I completely agree. Going back to the clubs and activities we've talked about, that's kind of a great way to remind yourself, like, hey, I really need to continue building these, not only when I'm in university, but like you said, seasoned veterans are still trying to work on that stuff too. But yeah, I completely agree with that. Another really good point. And I guess the last sort of question we have that I like to ask everyone, if you were back in school right now, is there any class or club that you would take? Is there anything different that you would want to do in order to improve where you are now? Maybe improve not only your technical skills, but essentially maybe how you do at work or whatever, essentially.
Right. So I think overall, I mean, everything kind of worked out for me better than I could have expected. So overall, I wouldn't want to jinx it by changing too much. But to answer your question, I think something that I was always interested in but never joined was one of these like dedicated case competition teams. And I think there's actually a class on it now. So definitely one of those. And I think the benefit it would have is you can probably also speak to this, but I think getting to work under pressure is definitely a skill that we don't get to work on too much during regular school projects. And like, there's always the pressure of grades, right? But there's never really like the external pressure of being judged on your work. And so apart from like grades, you don't really get that sense of I really want to bring the best of myself out here. And so when you get into work, there's it's a lot different experience where you don't just kind of submit something and hope for a great grade. You have to go in and actually debate and defend your work and really bring your entire self into your work. And it's a lot more of a process. And so I think these experiences where you're kind of forced into that situation, doing cases regularly with time pressure and judging, I think it definitely would help prepare you. And so I don't think I got that. I'm still learning it, but I think that's something I would have done if I could have had the time or just done it differently.
Yeah, fair enough. No, I definitely think that a lot of people try their best to do stuff like that, to do those kind of pressure situations. Uh, I've maybe done only a couple since I've been in university, and they're not overly enjoyable, but I'm glad to hear that they have some benefit at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, if it helps, like when I did my first case competitions, it was probably the most stressful thing I did in my life up to that point. And it sounds silly because it's just like a made up hypothetical. You walk in and there's nothing on the line, but it's just something about getting experience with being under that sort of pressure is super helpful for once you actually start work.
Yeah, for sure, that makes sense completely. I could definitely see, how that'd be beneficial. And I've definitely heard before that things like debate experience and, fast problem solving are, of course, useful in most fields, but especially in consulting. So yeah, another great point, and definitely makes sense. And that's really all I wanted to ask you today. If you have any final thoughts, feel free. But yeah, other than that, I covered everything, and it was great to chat with you.
Yeah, it was really great to chat with you. I think final thoughts, I would definitely recommend everyone, well, to beat a dead horse, I would recommend everyone to get involved as much as they can and to just really enjoy the most they can out of their university experience. I know it's hard right now, but hopefully in the future we can get things like study abroad programs running back up. I would definitely really recommend those. It really changes the way that you approach a lot of your life and schoolwork. As cheesy as it sounds, it does change you. So I would really recommend just kind of putting yourself out there, forcing yourself into positions you're uncomfortable, and just seeing what happens.
Yeah, No, that sounds good. That's a good note to end off on. And yeah, thanks so much again for taking the time.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.